Oh, hi all, welcome back to the John Deere B tractor restoration. And in the last video I discussed or suggested I was going to fit the con rods and pistons, and on the bench here we have pistons and con rods. Now these con rods are those con rods I got as a replacement for the old babbited bearings, babbited ones, which is one of them here. And if you recall, the reason I went down that route of replacing them was because of a rather large piece of babbit that has flaked out of one of the big ends. Now I don't know if that babbit would have caused a lot of problem. Probably it wouldn't have done, but I didn't like the way it was flaked right out to the edge, and I felt that we might lose a bit of oil pressure. So in the end, as I say, I went down the route of getting two second-hand con rods, and these are of a more modern type, probably out of a Model B, late Model B, sorry, or Model 50. And these type use these shell type bearings, which we're more used to. Now these bearings had to be, because I've had to buy new con rods, obviously we had to regrind the two big end journals, so they are 10 thou undersize. I've left them in the wrappers just so they don't get damaged until I get them fitted. So yeah, so these are now going to be 10 thou undersize with a modern type shell bearing. We put new little end bushes in, and here is one of the little end journals from out of one of the new pistons, and there we go. It's a lovely fit. That's good. So that's that. So then coming back to the pistons, yeah. As you recall, this tractor, when I first got it, the engine was stuck, seized, whatever you wish to call it. And eventually when we got it freed off and the old pistons taken out, it had actually done some slight damage to one of the cylinder bores. Now in the workshop here it didn't look too bad, but once out in the cold light of day it was actually quite pitted. And in fact there's still a mark in one of the bores, but it's only a very faint stain. And so because of that, obviously I've had to go down the rebore route, and in doing so, going down the rebore route, I've had to buy some aftermarket pistons, which seem to be the only ones now you seem to be able to get are these aluminium high top pistons. There's the original piston that came out of it, cast iron, interestingly 45 thou oversized, so it either suggests the engine had already been rebored, or in fact it had maybe been a blemish had been taken out in the factory and oversized pistons were put in. I believe that did happen. Yeah. So we've gone down the route of these aluminium oversized pistons. They're not my favourite, and for reasons I'm going to talk about. As you can see, the first problem, I've got the old gudgeon pin connecting them to each other, so we've got a sort of set point. As you can see, all the grooves match up near enough. Oil control groove and the base of them are correct. But the glaring problem with them is we've got 1/2 inch of height difference between the old one and the new one. Now generally, yeah, that's going to increase compression. Obviously it's going to give a little bit more power. I don't know how much more power, not a lot more I don't think, but you'll probably get another 3 or 4 or 5 horsepower out of it. But my problem with them is, and I've fitted this style of piston to at least 2 other tractors I've rebuilt, and my problem with them is, because I like to run them on kerosene, you do tend to get a little bit of engine knock or pinking, which I find very annoying. I run them on kerosene because A, in the UK petrol's expensive, so to run them on petrol, it is quite expensive, and B, I like to run them on kerosene because A, the kerosene helps with the lubrication of valve seats, because remember, these valves in these heads are cut just into the cast iron. There's no valve seat. And also, hey, I like the smell of kerosene, the more traditional smell, and all the rest of it that goes along with that. And so, as I say, you're sort of stuck with these modern equivalent pistons in these older engines. Now, rightly or wrongly, I believe this is a copy. These are copied from a later style of piston that were fitted to later at tractors, such as the 50. And as I say, the higher compression was to give them a little bit more power. But because of the kerosene having a low octane rating, if you put kerosene in them, they do tend to pink a bit. Even if you put in a 50-50 mix of kerosene and petrol. And so I'm going to be a little bit radical on this rebuild. I've measured these pistons up, and there's quite a lot of aluminium in this top section. There's nearly, that is the mark there. I don't know if it comes out. Is actually the base of the piston head inside, and so what we've got there is about 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to take round about 8mm or 5/16 of an inch off the top of these pistons. That will still leave plenty of material on top of the piston, but it will just take a little bit of the compression out of the engine and allow it to run, I'm hoping, a bit more smoother on the kerosene. Now I know some of you out there are going to say, what on earth's he on? Why bother doing that? But as I say, I'm trying to go for that traditional run of kerosene mix, and so I want to try it. I'm a bit of an experimentalist, as it were, so I want to see what happens. Yeah, there is a chance that I might wreck 2 perfectly good expensive pistons, which at the moment are hard to find in their own right. These they seem to have had a run of them there about 8 months ago, and now trying to find them is not that easy. But there you go, that's what I'm going to do, and you'll see how it works. These 45 thou oversized pistons I'm going to keep as spares for any other engine I might do, because they're good pistons, and I also have a brand new set of piston rings for them. So yeah, that's the plan with those. So I'll be able to turn these pistons down on my lathe, not a bother, and hopefully get them built up and put in the engine. So getting back to the tractor over here again, there was a couple of things in the last video that that I was sort of humming and hawing about and discussing, and one of them was camshaft end float this way. It seemed to be rather a large figure, between 15 and 30 thousandths of an inch of end float. And I said to myself, oh, I can't understand why on earth it's got such a big end float. I think it possibly has something to do with helping to rotate the cam followers or the cam lifters. I know when I used to play around with the V8 engines that we used to build, if you put solid lifters in, you used to have to give the cam a slightly bigger end float than you would if you put a hydraulic lifter in. And the idea was it was to help rotate the lifter inside the housing, or the housing in this case, which is bolted under these 3 bolts. And the idea, I think, was so it didn't stick, so that the cam follower moved, rotated, and it didn't actually stick in the housing. So I think that's what it was about. Anyway, long and the short of it is, I had 10 thou in the last video. I have now got 15 thou in this one. I put another shim in the in that housing just to shim it off. Paper shims, remember, they're nothing fancy, just made out of gasket material. And so we've got 15 thou there. So that's what I've done there, just to show you. Yeah, there's my dial gauge on its mag mount. So yeah, that's good. And the other thing I mentioned in the last video was I was after a core plug for that hole down there, and I said it was 80mm, and of course I think I said 80mm was 3 3¾ inches. Of course it isn't, it's 3¼ inches. And so still not been able to find one, so I might have to make one yet. But no, that's what it's about tonight. Get the tops knocked off these pistons a little bit, and get them into there on their rods, and then quietly install them. I'll try and do some video of me installing them. Again, it's always difficult doing the video and doing the job as well, but we'll give it a go. Okay then, thanks for that, bye.